Welcome to the Practice Management Study Club. Today's topic is staff incentives, bonus versus benefits. It is being presented by Sandy Balarjan, and we will begin the webinar shortly. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn the reins over to Devin Gillespie, Territory Sales Manager in Canada. Take it away, Devin.
Thank you, Jessica. As Jessica mentioned, our speaker tonight is Sandy Balarjan. Sandy is a leading authority on how to increase effectiveness of dental business systems. She is author of 3 textbooks, Dental Office Administration, first and second edition, published by Top Hat, and the Canadian Dental Office Administrator, published by Nelson Canada. She created the first certificate course in dental practice management at the University of Toronto, Faculty of Dentistry. Sandy has lectured at dental facilities across North America and has had articles published in many journals, including the Journal of Canadian Dental Association, Oral Health, Spectrum Teamwork, Just for Canadian Dentists, and many other publications. As owner-operator of Dental Office Consulting Services, Sandy specializes in dental practice management consulting, hiring, coaching and training dental teams, and implementation of in-office programs, business and operational plans. All right, Sandy, take it away.
Thank you so much. And welcome to staff incentives, bonuses versus benefits. So tonight we're going to talk about all of the options available to motivate your employees. So understanding that hiring the right people is one of the most important things that you will do as a dentist. Tonight we're going to talk about what are the advantages or disadvantages of having a bonus system in place, and do bonuses really motivate people to do a better job. So that's something we're going to examine as well. And then how to implement the benefits program without breaking the bank. And also at the end of this, I'll also talk about if you do decide that you would like to put a bonus system in place, we'll talk about the best way of doing that as well. So we're going to start with what are the advantages and the disadvantages of incentive bonuses. So it's important, of course, to attract and retain high quality staff, and employee compensation must include fair practices, of course, and reward employees based on the merit of each individual's performance. And that's really the key concept behind performance reviews, as well as incentives, motivational incentives. So to maintain consistency, you need to have regular reviews and provide feedback to your employees as well, because they really need that and they want it. Before we get started, I would like to just remind you of what staff costs should be running at. And for successful practice, they should be approximately 25% of your gross monthly production. And that it would include things like your withholding deductions and everything. Everything should be included. The 25% does not include the doctor's salary or the associate salary. So that's a question that I'm asked quite often. And that's why I thought I would just bring that up front. So it needs to include the withholding taxes as well as your bonuses. If you are including bonuses, then that needs to be considered as part of your overall staff costs. A bonus is a variable cost, and that's something that is difficult to stay within that benchmark. So it takes some analysis, some tracking, some planning, and it really takes time of your office manager, if your office manager is doing it, or if you have someone else doing it. You may have a consultant working at your practice who's working out the bonuses. Then it does take some time, or an accountant. But bonuses also need to be taxed. That's something that what I've found in my experience that staff members don't realize. You know, they're expecting these bonuses, but when the taxes are taken off, they get upset. So it's important to remember that you need to tax the bonuses as well. Do bonuses really motivate your employees to do a better job? So studies show that actually incentive bonuses can have the actual opposite effect, believe it or not. And I've actually witnessed this firsthand where they have some offices that I've worked with have had incentive bonuses in place. And if the targets aren't met, then all of a sudden the staff start getting really restless and they get upset that they're not getting a bonus. So it can be a demotivator as well as a motivator. So intrinsic motivation is really what helps to improve performance. And by that, I mean, if your employee is happy, they're interested in their job, they love what they do, then that makes all the difference, and they're going to do a really good job. And remember, maintaining consistency in performance and hiring your employees, helping them to stay interested in their jobs, those are really the keys to success. And remember, a bonus is just simply that. It's a reward. It's something extra, not on top of their regular pay. So it's not something that should be an expectation. And that's really what will happen what will cause people to be demotivated if they don't meet that expectation. So it should be something that is above and beyond what's expected of them. So if you have set certain targets, certain financial targets, and they have exceeded those targets, then you can consider awarding a bonus. There's a huge downside to bonuses, and that's what we're going to be talking about now. They're very labor intensive to administer. So you've got to have tracking in place, you have to have analysis in place, you have to it takes a lot of time, and usually it's the office manager that is working on this. So it requires monitoring, analyzing, and tracking. This requires the time and attention of your manager or your accountant, and then once again, those are both costs that you will having to be able to absorb as well when you are administering a bonus system. And it's really more important for your manager, for example, to be working on things like production, making sure the schedule's full, doing things that actually add value to your practice, and not necessarily spending as much time working on bonuses. The main concept with this too is that there are too many variables involved with this. So sometimes financial targets are not met because of the things that, like the doctor's holidays, stat holidays, statutory holidays. I find during the month of December, there are a lot of statutory holidays. And the fact is that there's very little work. There's a lot of time that is taken off during that time. So it's very difficult to meet those financial targets unless you have accommodated for them throughout the year as well. Unexpected shutdown. Unfortunately, we've all experienced the COVID crisis, which caused a lot of offices to shut down. In our area, they were shut down for 3 months, and it was very, very difficult to get that production back. On top of that, when the offices did reopen again, then there was a lot of protocols that were in place. So you were seeing fewer patients were coming back. So there's a lot of different variables involved. Nearby industries can cut benefits, and dental is always the first. Part of my background and experience is I did work in dental insurance for 4 major insurance carriers here in Canada. And dental was always the first benefit to be cut in the group benefits program because it's the most expensive. It's considered to be a living benefit, which means that if somebody has dental benefits, they're likely to go to the dentist and use their benefits. So they're always the first to be cut. And if that happens in your area, and if your office is insurance dependent, not necessarily insurance driven, but dependent on people who have insurance, then that can really affect your production. And also now we're also experiencing supply chain issues, and there can be all kinds of different variables. The cost of transportation is going up, cost of gas is going up, inflation, and so on and so forth. I won't depress you with one slide, but all of those things need to be considered when you are setting financial targets, and so that's the key point. So bonus systems can backfire on you, and I've witnessed this many, many, many times. Bonuses become an expectation of the employee. And think about when you first interviewed your employee, were they counting on that bonus? If you tell them you have a bonus system in place, then they're counting on the bonus, and if they don't meet the financial expectations for no reason of their own, then it can be a demotivator, and they get upset, and it can be considered punitive as well. So if financial targets aren't achieved, employees may feel that they're still entitled to receive a bonus. And I've seen this happen as well. You know, it doesn't matter if we're not receiving the financial targets, or we're not reaching them. You know, it's not my fault. So, you know, why aren't I getting a bonus? I'm working really, really hard. And that's how your your employees are thinking, is that they are working very hard. And in fact, they are. But the fact is that your practice simply can't afford to provide an extra or a bonus in that particular case. If your production's down, your practice is losing money, you can't afford to provide a bonus. If your employees do not receive the bonuses that they were expecting, then they may view that as being punitive, and then your morale suffers. So it's a really dangerous situation. It can also create a sense of unfairness. If bonus plans aren't administered well, they can create a sense of unfairness in your office, and that can really result in employee unrest. And I've seen this happen as well. The dynamics change from being patient-focused to being money-focused, and focusing on the monetary rewards instead of internal. And it can also create internal competition as well, which I've also witnessed happen. And it's really not good for your practice culture. And it's also not sustainable. So that's something that you need to consider as well. You can also inadvertently be rewarding poor performance. You know, if you create a bonus system where everyone in the practice gets a reward, you could potentially be rewarding someone who is not doing their job well and not performing well. And that can lead you into some really tricky situations, including a legal battle. If you had to discipline that person or terminate them, you can run into difficulties with the employment labor laws, because essentially you're condoning poor behavior and you're allowing it to happen. And yet you're giving them a bonus. They could go to an employment lawyer and say, you know, I was unlawfully dismissed because of the fact that, and I had no idea I was doing a bad job, and the doctor in fact gave me a bonus. So that's a potential risk as well. Some offices will choose to provide bonuses to the hygienists based on the production goals. And this is something that has always been a source of contention, certainly in some offices, and it certainly is something that I don't quite understand, and I'll tell you why. I realize that hygienists are providers, and they are producing dollar per hour units per hour, but the fact is that they are typically the highest paid employees in the office, you know, other than your dental assistant and receptionists, front desk people, administrators. So typically they are already receiving one of the highest salaries. This system is not patient-centered whatsoever, and it may encourage hygienists to rush through patient care to meet their production goals. I was in an office one time, to give you an example, where they were working on, there was one hygienist who was working on commission, the rest of them were working on an hourly basis. So the one that was working on commission, she would literally rush the patients through. It was like an assembly line in her operatory, and to try to get them in and out as fast as she could, because she was wanted to make more money. So that sets up a bit of a competitive situation, and the patients don't like it at all. They would actually cancel. A lot of patients would cancel in her column because of the fact that they felt that they weren't being treated as people, and it didn't work out in the long run because it was money based. It doesn't reward the hygienist who actually creates value for the patient, and I've seen this happen as well, where and I'll give you a specific example. I was in an office where there were 6 hygienists, and there was one hygienist who would do the same thing. She would rush people through to make her goals because she would get the bonus. And at that time, it was like a physical reward that they were getting. Anyway, the other hygienist would spend the extra time with the patient and educate them on the value of their periodontal health and their oral health and so on and so forth. And there was one day I tried to move some patients around for various reasons. Patients were delighted to be moved out of the one lady's column, the one that rushed them through, because they didn't like her, and but tried to move people out of the other lady's column who spent the extra time with them. It was almost impossible, and they would wait, if 6 months or they would wait for that person, even if she was booked up, and her schedule was always booked solid. So it really tells you who is creating the value for the patient, and also who's developing a relationship with the patient as well. It neglects the other supporting team members. And that's the thing I think that has always bothered me, is that if you're rewarding hygienists just for, typically, as I say, they're the highest paid employees, but who's making their appointments and who's really working hard at the front desk to try to avoid no-shows and short notice cancellations? Who's working to try to fill those hygiene schedules? So everybody is involved in that appointment. It's not just the hygienist that's involved, who's the producer. I understand that, but it's not just him or her that is involved. When I was putting this webinar together, I went to the Harvard Business Review because they had an interesting article on why incentive programs can't work. And I just wanted to share with you some of the excerpts from that. So certainly the vast majority of US corporations use some sort of program intended to motivate employees by tying compensation to one aspect of their performance or the other. But more striking is the rarely examined belief that people will do a better job if they've been promised some sort of incentive. So remember that it's an extrinsic motivator. According to numerous studies in laboratories, workplaces, classrooms, and other settings, rewards typically undermine the very processes that they're intended to enhance, which I thought was really, really interesting. Also, they will encourage only temporary compliance. So research suggests that by and large, rewards succeed at securing one thing only, and that is temporary compliance. When it comes to producing lasting change in attitudes and behavior, however, rewards like punishment can be strikingly ineffective. I thought that was really interesting, where you would think that rewards would be very effective. And there are some consultants who will insist that you put an incentive program into place, and that's going to boost your production and so on and so forth. And rarely, I don't think I've ever seen it. And I've been in this industry for a very, very long time. Once the rewards run out, people revert back to their old behaviors, and that's absolutely true. And in fact, they can revert to not just their old behaviors, but they can decrease the productivity that they were achieving before the incentive program went into place. Incentives are a version of what psychologists call extrinsic motivators. They do not alter the attitudes and underlying behaviors. They do not create an enduring commitment to any value or action. So rather, the incentives merely and temporarily change what they do. So they'll change the behavior temporarily, but not necessarily change the job satisfaction that the person has. I think I've used this example in past webinars, so I hope you'll bear with me for a moment. But I have a client right now who has a lovely lady who works on recalls all day and absolutely loves it. She loves her job. She takes pride in what she does. She gets upset if there's cancellations and no-shows. But I'm telling you, she does a great job. And it's not because of the amount of money that she's making. She does it because she loves doing it and she gets satisfaction from it. That's really what motivates your employees. So as for productivity, once again, this is still from the Harvard Business Review. At least 24 studies were done over the past 3 decades. And they've conclusively shown that people who expect to receive a reward for completing a task or doing the task successfully simply do not perform as well as those who expect no reward at all. So the reason I highlighted the word expect, because if it's an expectation, then they assume that it's part of their regular salary. And if they don't get that bonus, then they think that they're being punished. So it's really a difficult and tricky road. Interestingly enough, the researchers themselves were often taken by surprise. They assumed that rewards would produce better work, but discovered otherwise. And you are probably aware yourself, and I'm sure that you have had highly paid employees that didn't produce as well as somebody who is not receiving as much money. So I'm sure that you've experienced this in your own career. The question for managers is whether an incentive program can work when extrinsic motivators generally do not. So that's the thing, that keeping in mind how much time it takes the manager to be tracking all of this information, to be analyzing it, to be figuring out the bonuses and then distributing the bonuses. It takes a lot of time. So why do they fail in the first place? Few people take the time to examine the connection between incentive programs and problems with workplace productivity and morale. So all of these things are not necessarily taken into consideration when somebody suggests to you to put in an incentive program. Rewards will buy temporary compliance, which I've already mentioned. So it looks like the problems are solved. And this is a key point as well. It's harder to spot the harm they caused over the long term. It's also harder to spot the problems that exist. If somebody is doing something temporarily to make sure that they get a bonus, then you may not see an underlying problem that's occurring in the practice. So that's a really key point, and that's why I wanted to bring that one to your attention as well. Over the long haul, however, the potential cost to any organization is trying to fine-tune the reward-driven compensation systems, and it may be considerable. So if you're trying to fine-tune them and they're not working well, then that once again can take a lot of time. And think about how much you are paying your office manager to be doing this type of tracking and analysis. Even when I have some monitoring systems that I implement as well at offices, I try to make them as user-friendly as possible and not to take very much time. So in fact, I would say that on average, it will take the average hygienist, if I'm trying to track the hygiene production, it will take him or her approximately 2 to 3 minutes to fill in and basically they just need to fill in their downtime, because the computer systems don't necessarily track that. And it's very, very difficult for a computer system to accurately track what their downtime is. Pay is not a motivator. Of course, people want to be fairly paid and they want to be well paid. Everybody wants to be well paid. But even if people were principally concerned with their salaries, this does not prove that money is the motivator or is motivating. There's no firm basis for the assumption that paying people will encourage them to do better work, or even in the long run, more work. And once again, I've witnessed this firsthand. And I have clients who have multiple hygienists, and I'm going to pick on hygiene for a moment, but they have multiple hygienists and making approximately the same, maybe a little bit more, but they're always very highly paid. And yet there are some hygienists that don't produce what they should be producing per hour, per booked hour. And typically it should be about 5 times what they're earning. So if you have a hygienist who you're paying $40 an hour, then her billings should be about $200 per booked hour. And generally they're over that. So it's pretty easy to achieve that. But if not, then you have to look at different things. So you have to look at, are they billing correctly? Are they billing for the time that they've actually used with the patient, and the time? It's not just scalar to tooth time, it's included with the entire oral health instruction, everything that they're making the next appointment, and so on and so forth. So that's something that needs to be looked at and billed appropriately. I never encourage anyone to overbill or to bill for services that they don't do. I always tell hygiene teams to do what's appropriate for the patient and bill for what you do. It's that simple, and you will never go wrong in that case. So it's plausible to assume that if someone's take-home pay was cut in half, his or her morale would suffer enough to undermine their performance. That makes total sense. But it doesn't necessarily follow that doubling a person's pay would result in better work. So once again, it's not always, pay isn't always the main motivator. Punishment and rewards are actually two sides of the same coin. Both have a punitive effect because they are manipulative. So rewards have a punitive effect because, like outright punishment, they can be or are manipulative. In other words, do this and you'll get that is not really very much different from do this or here's what will happen to you. Once again, keep in mind, this is from the Harvard review. In the case of incentives, the reward itself may be highly desired, but by making bonus commitment contingent on certain behaviors, managers manipulate their subordinates, and that experience of being controlled is likely to assume a punitive quality over time. So whether the incentive is withheld or withdrawn deliberately or simply not received by someone who had hoped to get it, the effect is identical. And once again, I've witnessed this firsthand. And the more desirable the reward, the more demoralizing it is to miss out. So there are a lot of reasons that rewards being bonuses can actually cause more problems in your practice than motivation, for sure. They can also rupture relationships. So without teamwork, there can be no quality. So the I was telling you about that would rush the patients through to make bonus or make more money in her particular case. And she did not make too many friends with the remainder of the staff because they could see that she was getting rewarded. But as I say, the administrative people weren't necessarily being rewarded for making sure that she had a full schedule, that patients didn't cancel in her column as much as possible. And so they were not motivated to work with her. So really teamwork is the key. The surest way to destroy cooperation and therefore organizational excellence is to be able to compete for rewards, for recognition, or rank them against each other. I know I've been in organizations, and I'm sure you have as well, where you see employee of the month. So the other employees that may not be as competitive as that employee or may be working just as hard can sometimes harbor a little bit of resentment toward that person or toward the whole structure of how that should work. For each person who wins, there are many who carry with them the feeling of having lost. And the more these rewards are publicized through the use of memos or newsletters or awards, banquets, or whatever, the more detrimental their impact can be. So that's really the I think this is the final slide on the Harvard Business Review, and then we'll move on. So in order to solve problems in the workplace, managers must understand what caused them, and that's a huge point that I think is really important to recognize. Is you have to know what's caused it. So if they're temporarily masking that problem because they're working toward the bonus system and hiding maybe what the underlying problem is, then there's no way of getting to that problem and being able to resolve it on a permanent basis. Are employees inadequately prepared for the demands of their job? That's something to really consider as well. Do they have the full training that they require? Is long-term growth being sacrificed for short-term return? Are workers unable to collaborate effectively? So that's why your team meetings and everybody working together as a team and helping each other is really a key factor in motivating employees. Moreover, managers often use incentive programs as a substitute for giving workers what they really need to do the job. So instead of, and that's where we'll mask what the underlying problem is. So I'll just give you an example. If a hygienist is not making bonus or whatever, sometimes it can be a time management issue. So it's important during the performance review, for example, to talk to that hygienist about their time management and what can be done to make improvements, and be very specific about that when you're talking to them. So those are key things that managers and dentists need to consider if they're considering putting in a bonus program. Treating workers well, providing useful feedback and social support, and the room for self-determination is the essence of good management. And I'm just going to add to that room for growth as well. And growth doesn't mean necessarily moving up a fictional ladder, because I realize in dental offices you don't necessarily have a hierarchy. But the fact is that in my experience, I've found that dental office employees of any kind love to learn, and they love to go to maybe a course or something like that, and that in itself would provide an incentive for them. Some dangerous assumptions can be included in that. Promising reward to someone who appears to be unmotivated is a bit like offering salt water to someone who's thirsty. So if they're not motivated in the beginning, an incentive bonus isn't necessarily going to help include that or help that employee whatsoever. Bribes in the workplace simply can't work. Now, these are the words of from the Harvard Business Review. I wouldn't necessarily say bribes, but anyway, that's just something that's in there. People who do exceptionally work may be glad to be paid, and even more glad, of course, to be well paid, but they do not work necessarily just to collect a paycheck. They work because they love what they do. And this is really obvious when you're working with dental office staff. You can tell who's working for the paycheck. They will be out the door 5 minutes after you are finished seeing patients. And then there'll be other people who will hang around, make sure everything's set up for tomorrow, make sure everyone is doing well, the schedule's all set for tomorrow. And those are the people that really deserve who are committed to not just the success of your practice, but certainly the success of their own job. What's far more surprising is that rewards like punishment may actually undermine the intrinsic motivation that results in optimal performance. The more a manager stresses what an employee can earn for good work, the less interested the employee would be in the work itself. So now we've talked about the incentive bonuses. As I say, at the end of this, I will also talk to you about if you still want to have an incentive bonus in your practice. I'll show you how you can do that as well. I want it to be in a fair and objective approach for this presentation tonight. So now we're going to talk about benefit plans. Now, benefits plans provide a sense of security to employees. And I know when I'm interviewing employees, I always get asked this question, if there are any benefits in place. And recruitment agencies will also ask that question as well. It makes people more confident in their positions. And it makes people stay in their positions longer as well. That's something else to consider. According to Glassdoor's 2015 Employment Confidence Survey, about 60% of people report that employee benefits and perks are a significant factor to consider whether or not to accept a job offer. So they do ask that question. Now, I looked into how much a benefits plan will cost, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of dental offices don't have benefits plans, which are group benefits plans, in place, is because they're expensive and they're usually cost prohibitive for a practice. So the average cost is approximately $2,000 per year for a full-time employee. This can vary depending on what company that you're dealing with, but I just took an overall average. There's always an annual maximum involved, just like dental insurance. There's limited services that are covered. Co-payments, there's always co-payments involved, and frequency limitations, just like dental insurance, is set up exactly the same way. And it goes on and on. The majority of businesses that I deal with, the dentists that I deal with, find it too cost prohibitive. And if I look into it on behalf of a dentist and I call one of the insurance carriers, they usually like to start with a minimum of 25 employees. Not always, they can set it up for smaller groups as well, but they usually like the larger groups. With benefits plans, they are generally, it depends on how they're set up, but they are usually a taxable benefit to the employee. And that's a key thing to remember too. So they're taxable to the employee. Some pros and cons of a group dental plan, and this information was provided to me by Adam Tenischuk, who's been in past webinars before from Dental Tax. So greater amounts are provided in total multiple benefits. So for example, drugs, glasses, massage therapy, physio, dental, etc. So they will cover certain portions of that. The downside for the employee is that there's an annual deductible. They have frequency restrictions. So for example, glasses, vision care, if they cover that, then it will be maximum of $300, but every 2 years. So, you know, you might need glasses more frequently than that. There's always an eligibility period requirement. So it's usually 90 days. Although the premium is still charged during that time. So the employee or the employer, in most cases, it's a 50-50 contributory plan. So the employer pays half and the employee pays half. But there's a 90-day eligibility period. So when a new employee starts, they aren't eligible to receive benefits for 90 days. However, you still have to pay the premiums for those 90 days. In other words, the fees. Restricted to the plan and the amounts provided. So for example, as I mentioned, $300 for glasses, maybe 80% of massage, up to a maximum of $500 per year. So they don't, a lot of plans don't cover massage or physiotherapy. Some do, some don't. It depends on how the plan administrator at the insurance company sets up the plan and how they set the premiums at as well. There's usually a co-payment involved for the employee, and depending on how the plan is set up, as I mentioned, it could be a taxable benefit to the employee. So that affects their taxes. As I mentioned, this was provided to me by Adam Tenischuk at Dental Tax. The pros for the dentist is that the plan is deductible in your corporation, to your corporation. Some downside is it's very costly and restrictive. Especially if you have a small number of employees. So if you have 10 employees or less, then it's, which is usually the average for a lot of smaller dental offices, then it will be a very expensive plan to administer. And also prices tend to rise. They never go down. Remember, something about insurance companies is they are financial institutions. They never lose money. So the premiums will always go up and the benefit level may go down. Changes to the plan are annual and they're established by the insurance company. So those are key things to think about. An alternative to benefits plans, to traditional benefits plans, are healthcare spending accounts. The pro to the employee is that they can use the full amount, whatever the allotted amount is, on a single item. There are limited restrictions and more flexibility for the employee. And they're not a taxable benefit to the employee. And also they are usually a tax deduction for the employer. So that's something to keep in mind as well. When the amount allotted, the downside would be it's gone for that year, but that's the same in traditional plans as well, or we call them indemnity plans. It's when it's gone for that year, but then it can be replenished the next year. So some pros and cons to the dentist. Typically it's pay as you go. So in other words, you would allot a certain amount per employee. And as the expenses are incurred, the employee would bring the receipt to you, and then then you would pay it out, or the healthcare spending account, wherever it's administered, would pay the employee. The dentist simply tops up the plan. So if they use, $200 in massage therapy, for example, or physiotherapy, then that would be, the doctor would only have to pay the $200. Whereas indemnity programs or traditional programs, you have to pay those premiums whether or not your employees use the benefit. So that's a key thing to keep in mind as well. Flexible and low fees, typically they charge 10% of whatever the expense is. So it's less costly to the employee, to the dentist. Some downside might be your employee may get less if they have health issues for drugs, for example, because drugs are very expensive. They may not be as happy with a full group versus a full group program. However, they also have more flexibility and they can make their own choices. And that's really a key thing for healthcare spending accounts to keep in mind as well. They provide your employees with the flexibility of obtaining services that suit their individual needs of each of your employees, while providing the dentist with the tax benefit. And that's a key thing to remember. Your employees will be able to choose what's right for them. and not be restricted by plan designs and that don't address their individual needs for your employees. So they're a great benefit to the employee, and employees love healthcare spending accounts. Healthcare spending accounts allow their employees to make their own personal decisions about their healthcare spending and actually save the employer's money, because you only top up the plan once they use the benefit. It's a win-win solution that helps dentists retain high-quality staff members. Adding healthcare spending account to your personnel policies is a great way to keep your employees happy and provide them with meaningful reward for the dedication to your success as well. Something else that as I mentioned, I've been in this industry for many, many years, and I've witnessed where employees will work for a dentist, for one dentist, for 25, 30 years, and when they leave with no pension. So that's something that's always bothered me. And the fact is that I realized that employees should be responsible for their own pension, their own savings, but long-term employees, you want to reward them somehow, or at least encourage them to start investing in their own retirement. And that's really something that I would encourage. So government pensions, as you may be aware of, they're really inadequate to pay the expenses of daily living, especially now with inflation as it's going up. Gas prices are out of through the roof, and so on and so forth. So what I would recommend, and I've seen this happen and it works really, really well in with some clients of mine, where they have set up a healthcare spending account, and whatever's not used in the healthcare spending account. So let's say, for example, they set up $1,000 per employee, and the employees didn't use their healthcare spending account because they didn't need to use anything. Then the employer would take that $1,000 or whatever is left in their healthcare spending account and put it into a registered retirement savings plan for the employee. So basically they're setting them up and they're getting started on helping that employee to start saving for their retirement. And so that way, when the employee, the 30-year employee that's been working for you and been so loyal to you for all of those years, has built up a pension fund, a supplemental pension fund. And I just think it would be a really great benefit to your employees. It's also tax deduction for the doctor, so it's a win-win-win situation, and it really rewards your long-term employees by helping them to realize that they can actually enjoy a retirement. So now we've looked at benefits programs, we've looked at bonus systems. If you still want to include a bonus system, then I think that's great. That's entirely up to you. It's your choice, it's your practice. What I recommend is that you link the team goals and the individual roles and accountabilities to their performance goals, which we've talked about in past webinars as well. Implement and maintain a performance checkpoint process. So once again, this will take tracking, it will take monitoring, and reporting back to your employees so they know how well they're doing. It's important to develop a clear link between performance reviews and rewards. So always start with your office budget. So it's really important to have an operating budget that you review annually, that you monitor. I monitor monthly with my clients, but definitely quarterly. So start with your dental office budget as your benchmark. And this also helps to give you objective data when you are doing performance reviews. I'm not saying necessarily share your budget with each employee, but it will give you some data if using the system that I talked about in April, but I'm going to show you how it actually works to have a performance agreement in place, have a performance scorecard in place that will help your employees they can see visually how well they're doing or how well they're not doing. So team members in this particular case are committed to your budget without necessarily knowing it, and also to your revenue growth as well. So when the goals are met or exceeded, then the office bonuses can be rewarded. The goals that are set, they really need to be tied into each individual's performance. So for example, someone at the front desk might be in charge of accounts receivable. So if you see a difference in the accounts receivable and they are greatly reduced and they're collecting more money at the time of service, then that will be a goal that they would have to reach. Results should be tracked quarterly to be prepared for fluctuations, because think about this, during the month of December, in fact, that's usually when you've got all the statutory holidays to pay out, that you're seeing sometimes there's some closures. Some people will close between the Christmas and the New Year, for example, so it's very difficult to meet the financial targets. Having said that, it's also, December can also be a great time, because some of the annual benefits are running out and people want to make sure that your patients might want to make sure that they use up their benefits before the end of the year. So it's very hard to meet financial targets. There are a lot of holidays. Doctors may be taking their holidays as well. I've talked about what the variables would be for that. So if targets are exceeded, then everyone would share a percentage of the excess. And I'm going to show you how an actual office, we did this with an actual office. So I'm going to give you these results. Of course, no names will be mentioned. So each person will have individual goals that relate directly to their position. So for example, the dental assistant might be in charge of the sundry supply ordering. So where she would be given a specific goal or a dollar amount that she would have to stay within when she's ordering on a monthly basis. So that's an example of a goal. The front desk people, keeping the schedule booked and having less than a certain amount of percentage of downtime would be a specific goal that would relate to their position. So that's where I was headed with that. So the results would appear on their performance agreement scorecard. So just like a report card, it would show them how well they're doing, or if you're not meeting the targets during that time frame. It's very important that each of goals are nice, they're great. As consultants, we talk about them a lot. However, what's important is that they also need to have a time-bound action plan. So if there's no action plan, then it won't get done. It's just a goal, and a goal can just be a wish list in that particular case. Are the goals objective, and are they realistic? If they're too unreachable, if they're not attainable, then it can be a demotivator as well. So the employee, if they can't reach that goal, then it could be a demotivator. Are there issues and blockages that prevent them from achieving that goal? So those are things to consider as well. And the employee might also need to have management support. So they might need additional courses. They might need to know what the budget is for ordering sundry supplies. They might need to know what sundry supplies are. And that's what I found in most offices, is that if whoever's in charge of ordering sundry supplies, sometimes they will put in a handpiece or some instruments or something that are not considered sundries. The sundries are consumables. They're used up in the day-to-day operations of the dental practice. And things like handpieces and that, they are equipment, and so they have depreciation value. But that's where the management support would kick in. So you would have to help the employee understand that and to know what the difference is between the two. I always suggest to track this quarterly and report it to your team quarterly as well. This allows for any fluctuations, for example, stat holidays, the doctor's holidays, as well, hygiene holidays, staff vacations, that kind of thing. Just be careful. If you do have a bad quarter, any bonus system can become a demotivator. And that's what I've talked about right in the very beginning. And then what happens is your morale goes down. And when your morale goes down, then your production goes down. If you have happy employees who are internally incentivized to do a really good job, then that goes a lot further. And if the morale is high, everybody's enjoying their position and they're enjoying the people that they work with, your production will improve. It just happens automatically. So here's an example of an incentive bonus program. So in this particular case, we've set a monthly production goal, let's say of $100,000. And if the office achieved a production of $120,000, this is gross production before taxes. So keep that in mind as well. So they've exceeded the goal by $20,000. I suggest returning 50% to the practice. And the reason for this is because to allow for fluctuations during the quarters that that may not have done as well. And I'm going to show you an example of this. And also keep in mind, you've got to tax those bonuses. So you've got additional taxes, you've got additional time spent on monitoring and analyzing and that kind of thing. So then take 25% of the excess and distribute that in bonuses. It's in a way, it's a win-win situation. So in other words, everyone's achieved the financial targets that have been set, and then they get a reward. So it is a win-win. So this is an example of what a performance agreement, performance agreement scorecard looks like. So what's important to this practice? Financial performance, patient satisfaction, team development, operational efficiency, so on. How is that going to be measured? How will these things be quantified? So, well, we would assume that the budgeted revenue versus the actual would be a good metric, and the accounts receivable is percentage of gross billing, percentage of open chair time, and number of new patients, so on and so forth. So then what are the goals for this particular practice? In this practice, they set a revenue goal of $73,000 per month of production. This office had more than one doctor, and anyway, that was their production goal. So on a quarterly basis, it would be $219,000 per quarter. First quarter, they did great. And this depends on when your fiscal year is as well. So there's lots of things to consider. They exceeded their target by $5,000. That's wonderful. But look what happened in the second quarter. They went down and there was actual shortfall of $3,221. But then in the third quarter, they exceeded it by $11,000. So you see where the fluctuations are. And that's really why I wanted to point that out. So all in all, at the end of this, they achieved, $29,000 over their budget. So they could distribute that if they haven't distributed their bonuses on a quarterly basis, which I really recommend. Then at the end of the year, then they can do the overall. But I wouldn't wait till the end of the year. I would do it quarterly if you're going to do it at all. The accounts receivable, there's areas that I've highlighted that I've just highlighted because there are shortfalls here as well. So their goal was to achieve 21,900. Their actual was 42,000. So they were 21% over in over 90-day accounts, which is a whole other problem as well. The percentage of open chair time, they wanted to achieve less than 5% open chair time for dentists and less than 10% for hygienists, because hygienists generally have more open chair time than the doctors. And you can see that they were on target here, but they were slightly increased, the next quarter, and then so I highlight the areas where they may or may not be achieving their goals. The end result of this was that their targeted production was $219,000 per quarter. Their actual production during one of the quarters was $235,453.21. So they exceeded their target by $16,453.21. The bonus funds available for distribution were at that time $4,113.30. So based on 25% of the excess, in other words, over target, the bonus would be $685.55 before taxes as a full share for a full-time staff member. For a part-time staff member, it would be $342.77. And if somebody were only worked there once per week, it would be half of that $342.77. So that's the actual numbers. Some notes that were made on this particular bonus system is the accounts receivable have increased. So somebody needs to work with the accounts receivable. And that's an important thing to consider. Who's responsible for the accounts receivable, and why isn't this going down? What's happening at the front desk? So it helps you to make really good decisions as well with your daily operations. The open chair time for the doctors is decreased. The short notice cancellations are averaging 15 per month, but no-shows are averaging at 13 per month. If you have 13 no-shows per month, there's a problem, and it's usually in the communications at the front desk. So what happens if your office results are below targets? So these are things to consider. Remember that the average overhead for a well-run practice is usually around 60% overhead expenses before taxes. Before taxes. The targets are based on gross production before taxes. If revenue drops and expenses increase, and you're going to find your sundries going up, especially with inflation right now, and the cost of shipping is going up for sure. If revenue drops and expenses increase, your profit margin is seriously affected. So you're making less profit. You need to be making a profit in order to provide rewards, because that's really what the key thing is with when you are providing bonuses as an incentive. So what then really motivates and retains employees at your practice? Having interest in their jobs with possible room to grow and continue learning. That helps somebody to feel satisfied with their job and to enjoy the people that you work with. That's important. Fair and equitable pay, of course, is an important thing to consider. Regular and consistent feedback. Every office that I go into, that's something that the employees often will tell me, is that they don't hear from the doctor, and that's understandable. You're working very hard and you are seeing your patients, so it's very difficult to give your employees feedback during the day because you're busy, and if you've got a very busy schedule, then you don't have time necessarily to give them feedback. Pay increases based on merit of individual performance versus unpredictable and uncertain bonuses based on factors that they may have no control over. So for instance, ordering supplies, you have no control over the cost of supplies going up. So if your dental assistant is in charge of ordering the sundries, then she may not have that ability to have any control over that. What motivates employees too is job security. Know that their job is secure, that the doctor is fair, that you're doing regular performance reviews, and that you will increase their salary based on merit of performance. That's really the key thing. So in summary, in total, what's best? Bonuses or benefits? It's entirely your choice. You have to decide what's best for your practice. But tonight we've examined the pros and cons of both, and you make the decision on what you think would work best for your practice. So in summary, I'm repeating this phrase because I thought treating workers well, providing useful feedback, social support, and room for self-determination is the essence of good management. Tonight we've talked about what are the advantages and disadvantages of incentive bonuses. Do bonuses really motivate employees? As well as how to implement a benefits program without breaking the bank. Okay, thank you for your time and attention, and let's open it up for some questions.
Thank you, Sandy, as always, and a very highly informative webinar. We do have some questions in the audience. Devin, are you able to pull them up?
Yeah. So first question, Sandy, with the increased demands from hygienists and even assistants for higher and higher wages, how can this 25% be achievable?
Well, I know it's tough right now because the employee wages are going up and there is a shortage of staff. However, always look at the schedule. The schedule, if everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, then avoiding no-shows and short notice cancellations and keeping the schedule full and productive, then it is achievable. And you may have to make some fluctuations right now because the pay increases are even higher. Something that I have come across, just I don't know if this is going to be a question, but I've come across this, is I've had doctors asking me if they have an employee there who's making less than this new employee coming in, should they be giving that existing employee a raise? And I always recommend it. But once again, look at your production. Make sure that your schedule is tight, that not too tight that you don't have any flexibility, but just making sure that it is full and productive, and that money is being collected at the time of service. And then all of these things will help to stay within that 25%.
Great. So next question: bonuses given to all employees, no matter what their participation or motivation is, creates unfairness and discourages the ones who are going above and beyond. How do you treat that?
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you how I treat it. And this is, as you can tell by the tone of the webinar tonight, I'm not a huge fan of bonuses, because I've seen it happen too often, where it creates so much discourse in offices. It creates that sense of unfairness. And so my advice would be, and I tell all my clients this as well, to have regular performance reviews and to reward employees based on merit of their individual performance. So on an annual basis, if you are doing your performance reviews and you've got some top performers there, then give them a merit increase that based on how well they're doing. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind is during that, of course, staying within your limits. So you have to do your budget first. Always do your budget first. Make sure that you've got the money in there to award the employees extra money if you need to. If you have a system set up where they're achieving their targets, then that's always a good thing for you to know as well. And but based on merit of performance, and if someone is not performing well, then don't give them a salary increase, but you might want to put them on a performance improvement plan, and just to help them achieve their goals for the next quarter. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can a HCP be administered by the dentist, or does it have to be administered by a third party?
It's usually a third party. I would suggest a third party, because it depends on how you set it up. You know, you could do your own healthcare spending account just by allotting so much and having your employees come in and bring you the receipts from their expenses. But again, that's going to take your time. So if you have a really good office manager who can handle that kind of thing, then absolutely you can do it yourself. I'd recommend the companies that do it, because it really doesn't cost very much. I have HCP set up with my company, and it really is next to nothing. You're only charged that 10% or whatever the admin fee is. You're only charged that when you actually submit a claim. So, it's really nothing.
Here's an interesting one. If you've had a bonus system in place for a long time, how can you phase it out?
That's a really good question, and I would just like rip the Band-Aid off, and just let them know that due to the pandemic, the increased expenses, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of reasons for it, but I would also add to that, when you're meeting with each person individually, or when you're meeting with your team, let them know that you're going to be doing performance reviews based on merit of performance, and that salary adjustments will be made accordingly, depending on each person's individual performance. So rather than the whole team, because that's a perfect example of when it becomes an expectation. If it becomes an expectation, then they think, that, I'm being punished, because you're not giving bonuses anymore. So I would absolutely have a team meeting with everyone, and just talk to them about how your performance reviews are going to happen, how everyone will be rewarded based on their merit of their individual performance and their individual achievements. And that should help to take the pain out of the Band-Aid.
So we're going to jump over to the chat box for a couple more questions. What are some performance criteria for assistants?
Definitely ordering, but also something else I look at with assistants is I look at the equipment maintenance costs. So your equipment maintenance should be 1% or less. If it's over that, then I have a look at what's happening with that equipment. You know, is it aging or is it being handled properly? Do you have to replace, I was in an office one time where they had to replace scalers over and over and over again because in their downtime, the hygienists, there were 2 hygienists at that office, they were just sharpening instruments because they didn't want to call patients, they didn't want to do anything else. So they would sharpen the heck out of those instruments. And consequently, what happened is they had to keep replacing all of their scalers over and over again. So, that would be one criteria is certainly the equipment, how they handle the equipment, ordering sundry supplies, inventory control is another one. And finally, if the doctor's production is increasing, that can be attributed somewhat to whether or not you have a really good assistant, because as you know, an assistant can either help speed you up or slow you down too, if you have to keep asking for things and they're not doing things properly. So those things, I would look at the doctor's production as well as your equipment and your supplies.
Great. Yeah. And this next one, one of the attendees is just looking for your comments and I guess suggestions. They have instituted a health spending account as well as a pension plan,
Wow.
Great work environment, and still have staff leave, even with performance review and great communication. Now they're leaning towards more of a bonus system with very specific bonuses. What are your thoughts?
If you don't have one in place, I would say I wouldn't start it now. I honestly wouldn't start it. First of all, your staff costs are automatically going up. So the last comment that somebody was asking about the 25%, you're absolutely right. It's going to be tricky in today's environment to stay within that 25%. What's happening in the dental field is that there's such a shortage of staff that I find it's, especially with assistants, that they know they can, a new grad can, start off at $25 an hour or ask almost anything that they want. So they know that the environment is out there, but it's not going to be like that forever. It's like a pendulum, it goes back and forth. So they can take advantage of it right now, but eventually it's going to swing back the other way. So I would say it sounds like you've got really good practices in place where you're doing merit increases, you are doing performance reviews. I would keep it that way, honestly. And if somebody's going to leave because they're not getting a bonus, so be it. I wouldn't get into it if you haven't done it already. And it sounds like you've got a great system going now. So I wouldn't mess with it, honestly.
What percentage of gross income should payroll be?
I would say between 20 and 25%. Is very hard to get to 20, but 25% maximum. If it's over 25%, that's always a key thing that I look at. It's one of the benchmarks that I look at when I go into an office. And if it is, then I can guarantee, if it's over 25%, I can guarantee you there are openings in the schedule. It's as simple as that. So because your overhead expenses always go up when there's openings in the schedule, or it's not being booked effectively. So the schedule is tied in directly to what your staff costs are. But that's one of my benchmarks is 25%. Yeah.
And then back to the question box. If I want to pay associate dentist per day, how to structure it? So yeah, if I want to pay an associate dentist per day, how do I structure it?
That's a tricky question. In my experience, they're usually paid on a percentage of their production. It's generally around 40%. So whatever they produce, they would get 40% of that. If you want to pay them on a daily basis, I think you would have to set up a structure of how much you're going to pay them on a daily basis. The only thing is, I would be a little bit cautious of that because you certainly want your associate to be producing well as well. So it's easier to pay them on a percentage of their gross production, and it's usually around 40%.
And then this next one, looking for comments as well from you, Sandy.
Okay.
I have already removed the health spending account and pension plan due to the pandemic and have new staff now. Want to try bonus system instead.
You remove the healthcare spending account and the
Pension plan.
and the pension plan. Oh,
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. So you want to put a bonus system in place? The one thing that I would really recommend is if you don't have one in place now, I wouldn't put it in place. I would go back to the healthcare spending account because remember, it's a tax deduction for you. And so that's something to consider. I realize that the indemnity programs are as well, but that can be a taxable benefit to your employees. So it's a win-win situation if you do something like that. And I personally, if you want to do a bonus system, then you can do it the way I just showed you, where you they have to meet certain financial targets. But be careful with that, because if the quarters where they fluctuate, where you have fluctuations in your production, then it can look as if it's punitive if the employees don't get the bonus system. So honestly, if you don't have one in place, I would not put one in place. That's just my opinion. And the healthcare spending account, the pension plans, those are the key things that employees will. I realize that the age of the employee is going to make a difference. If it's a young person, they're certainly not thinking of pensions, but the 20 years goes by in a heartbeat. So you never know if it would encourage really good habits of controlling their own pension plans as well for when they do retire. So that's my advice. If you do want to set up a bonus plan, then do it where you have financial targets that they have to meet. And when they exceed those targets, that's when you would provide a bonus. Something that some offices have done as well is if they meet the target but don't exceed it, they'll give like a flat rate, like $250 or something per person. But then again, always watch where your staff costs are at on your budget. So that's my advice.
All right. Couple more here, Sandy. How much do you put in the health savings plan? And what are some companies that administer these?
It depends where you're calling from. So the one that I use, do you know what? I'd rather, if you want to contact me directly, just send me an email. There's my email address on the bottom there. Send me an email address and I will send you, I'll get some names of some companies that you can administer them through, depending, once again, if you're in Canada, I know some in Canada. In the US, I'll have to find out, I'll research and get them for you. But if you wouldn't mind, we can communicate directly. If you just send me an email, I'll be happy to find out that information for you.
And
yeah, thank you, Sandy. With that, it looks like, oh no, wait, there's another one. Another one came in, Devin, sorry.
Yeah, no, all right. Do you recommend that associates get paid for x-rays that were taken by hygienists?
No, I think that, sorry. Yeah, the x-ray, the production to the x-rays should always go to the provider. So I would say that production should go to the principal of the owner of the practice.
Great, thank you. And that looks like all the questions, and being it's a quarter past the hour, we will bypass the polls this evening. We would love if Sandy welcomes your comments and questions. Her email is sandy@dentalofficeconsulting.com. And then mark your calendars and register. Her next webinar is Monday, June 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is how to conduct effective meetings that produce results. So with that, we'll begin the closing. Devin, would you like to address the audience?
Thank you, everyone, for being with us for this last hour. Thank you a bunch, Sandy, and thank you, Jessica.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Sandy, how would you like to address the audience?
I'd just like to say, reinforce the fact that if you do have more questions, then feel free to contact me directly. And thank you for this opportunity for allowing me to share what knowledge I have.